Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going over the top side deck cards you guys need to have in your decks for July 2023. So if you guys are new, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you never miss a video. And if you guys want to help support the channel and want to buy into the cards that we talk about in this video, or any trading cards for that matter, it does help me out if you use my link in the description to TCG Player. I really do appreciate it. And let's go ahead and get started with the first set of cards. We have Deborah, Ritual at Hand, and Gohan, Trusted Ally, which represents this card itself and a green card that's very, very similar. Unfortunately, the other colors don't have cards like this, but these cards have been like, you know, semi considerations in the past. If your deck like really loses to a hand control deck, odds were you wouldn't play against one in Swiss or Top Cut. But like if you played a blue deck or a control deck that lost to hand control, you wanted to maybe consider siding these cards. You could be a little greedy and not side them. But now with Gohan in the format, these are almost like mandatory side deck cards. Like every successful list pretty much has Deborah or their green or yellow equivalent of Gohan, Trusted Ally, in their side deck. So now, which is important to note, these are almost mandatory side deck cards when they never really have been in the past. Alright, now we have Shen Noble Supremacy and Mutato the Broken Seal. So these cards are here to shut down boss monsters. I am more partial to Mutato the Broken Seal because it has more flexibility. Like, it's still live later in the game. It's a decent attacker. It can shut down more things than Shin, technically. Shin is still good, but it's got the problem of really only being great if you go second. But if you're playing certain strategies, like aggro strategies that only want to play up to like turn 4, Shin can be very good at shutting down your opponent's boss monsters, and it's cheaper on energy, it's more efficient. But if you are playing a bit of a more like controller mid-range strategy, Mutato the Broken Seal is probably the way I'd recommend you go. These cards are particularly great at shutting down Goku, Gohan, Father-Son Solidarity, which is the boss monster of the best deck in the current format, which is green SS2 Gohan. So both these cards are great at shutting down that card. These cards are also great against other boss monsters, but again, where Mutato is a little bit more flexible is that you can call any Vital Engine card if you know how your opponent's deck operates, and then, you know, basically end their turn if you call it right. So Mutato are a little bit more flexible, but both cards are definitely great for shutting down their respective threats. Alright, now we have King Vegeta, Hidden Ambitions, and Hunt of the Demon God. These cards are particularly good against 1-cost extra cards that are being activated without their energy cost being paid. So a big one in this format is going to be Uneasing Awakened Rage, which again is the floodgate of the best deck in the format, green SS2 Gohan. But there's also other scenarios where these cards can be good. For example, yellow has like Release from Evil or Time Magic, which they can activate for free. Blue is infamous for using Dimension Magic while tapped out to get 2 energy open. These cards can be really good in those scenarios for punishing your opponents when they are tapped out. I wouldn't say side a ton of these, like Hunt of the Demon God, maybe 1 or 2 depending on the strategy you're playing. King Vegeta Hidden Ambitions is not an extra card, so it's okay to have a few in your hand thanks to the combo power, but I'd still recommend playing only 1 or 2. I don't think you want to clog your side deck with this card because it's rather situational. Like, you got to be in the perfect scenario for these cards to work, but in those scenarios, these cards will probably win you the game. So it's probably worth siding like a 1 of at the very least. Now we have Quitzkai Mechanical Courage. This has been a side deck staple for many, many formats. This is just great against decks that play a lot of floodgates. That is pretty much all of blue and yellow right now, with some other like certain strategies of other colors kind of mixed in. Like typically you won't want this against red, but if you play against Bulma, which is a red leader, you'd want this card in from your side deck. But it's also good against rival strategies, decks that play cards during the battle step on your turn. Those aren't too popular right now, but it's still a nice coverall to have Quitzkai in your side deck for those situations. Then we have Black Smoke Dragon, Accumulated Negativity. So what this card was really used for a majority of the time, like 1 or 2 formats ago, was the ability to remove 2-cost unisons, and that still is a really great effect. However, you're probably just going to be using it a little bit less frequently, or maybe a lot less frequently, now that the 2 major red decks are out of the format in the form of SS4 Gogeta and Red Sin Shenron, because getting that SS4 Gogeta Powers Connection unison off the board was just so important. And I guess you could also consider the Gamma Band, because that deck also revolved around 2-cost unisons. So that effect on this card is probably a lot less necessary, although against certain rogue decks, it's going to be nice to have this card in your side deck for when that situation comes up. However, now that there is more hand control in the format, again in the form of, you know, Green Gohan, and maybe even the Expert 21 deck that doesn't necessarily discard your cards but puts them to the bottom of your deck through various effects, it is nice to have this 2-cost draw 2 And if you ever need the barrier removal, it is just great for that as well. So it's just such a versatile card that you can't go wrong putting it in your side deck for whatever situation one of the effects will help you out in. Then we have Jiren, Survival of the Fittest. So when it comes to this card, guys, I basically want to give you a little bit of a warning because I've seen people misuse this card, or maybe I should say put it in their side decks when it's totally unnecessary. The thing with Jiren is it pretty much counters one boss monster. That's Android 17, Turning the Tide. When that card's played, both players shuffle their entire hands back into their deck. That might sound like a big downside for the player playing the card, but they'll have their leader swing, and they'll also pretty much just know that you don't have any negates or combo power to get out of their attack. So if they have an established board, that Turning the Tide is probably going to win them the game. But Jiren basically says, all right, you shuffle your hand and I won't shuffle my hand thanks to the counterplay. Now, the thing about Jiren where people go about misusing it is they put it in decks that aren't or shouldn't be afraid of a 7-drop bomb, and those are aggro decks. If you're playing a red aggro deck or a black aggro deck, odds are you probably don't need Jiren, Survival of the Fittest in your side deck, because you should be killing your opponent before they ever get to the point of playing a 17 Turning the Tide safely. If they get to that point, you probably lost the game whether you have Jiren in your side deck or not, right? And that's also the thing about it being a 2-cost card. It's not very efficient for aggro decks to be leaving 2 energy open on defense. If you're playing an aggro deck, you should not be leaving so much energy open on defense, like maybe 1 the most, depending on the situation. So I wanted to give that little disclaimer because, again, I see this with like coaching clients and patrons all the time, kind of like misusing this card, misunderstanding the role it plays and when it should be implemented in side decks. So when should you play Jiren in your side deck? Well, if you're playing a mid-range or control deck where it's, you know, highly likely that these blue decks are going to be able to ramp 1 to 2 times against you and the threat of Turning the Tide is real, that's pretty much when you want to have Jiren, Survival of the Fittest in your side deck. So yeah, don't include this if you're playing an aggro deck, but if you are playing a mid-range or control deck and you kind of just fall over to Turning the Tide, you want to include the 1 of, maybe a 2 of, but I mean, at that point, you're basically playing a 1 of for their 1 of, and that, you know, kind of makes sense, especially in Dragon Ball Super where we draw so many cards. All right, now we have our counter plays like Focus Breakthrough in green, Tyrannical Blow in yellow, Beerus Ball in red. We have Absolute Release Ball and Desperate Measures in blue, and Super Kamehameha in black. Now, these cards are in a lot of people's main decks at like 2 ofs, maybe sometimes 3 ofs. But what I would say is like somewhere between your main and side deck, you want to have 3 to 4 copies of these cards. And I'm even leaning a little bit more towards like 4 of total, because they're not only good against your opponent's floodgates, but they're also good against the ramp decks, namely Android 21 and Blue Beerus if you happen to face it. Being able to counterplay your opponent's 2-cost Z deck ramp is vital to helping you win that matchup. And obviously it's a little bit situational, like Focus Breakthrough, you got to be at 4 life to activate it, so if you're not at that point on turn 2, can't really use in that situation. However, Tyrannical Blow does have the flexibility of being usable in that exact scenario. And if you come across a matchup where they have random 3-cost cards that you can counterplay with this that are kind of vital to their strategy, you know, all the better, right? But yeah, these are cards that are much better as time goes on, and they've been getting better. So yeah, 3 to 4 copies between your main and side. If you're maining 2, put 1 to 2 more in your side deck. Then we have Gallop Cannon. So now I have a couple just like color specific side deck options, and this one's for red, obviously. So Gallop Cannon, it is a counterplay, but it doesn't actually stop the thing being played or stop it from resolving its effects like Beerus Ball would. However, this is a card that, unlike Beerus Ball, can be activated when you're at 4 or more life, and it's really good for stopping Android 21 in the name of peace. So in that 21 ramp matchup, you can basically stop them from getting their ramp by teching Gallop Cannon in your sideboard. Red does kind of struggle in terms of having cards that allow it to counterplay this early in the game, especially at 2-cost 10k. Gallop Cannon is that card. So if you're struggling against 21 with the red decks, you definitely want to consider this card to stop their ramp. Then we have Riot Javelin. This card's pretty cool because red overall is a lot less popular, so that means we're not seeing as much Broly Crown, and that means blue decks can kind of leave open a bit more energy and play a little bit more frivolously on defense. And Riot Javelin's always been a cool card because it's really, really good against Z deck battle cards, because typically bouncing a battle card back to your opponent's hand is not that great, and it feels kind of bad to do so for 2 energy on defense. But when you're staring down a Z battle card, if you would bounce it back to their hand, it gets removed from the game. So if your opponent's playing like a Rush Attack Vegeta and gives barrier, if they're playing an SS4 Goku Defender of Life and that gains barrier on play, or if they're playing like a 5-cost Vegito in blue that has barrier and triple strike, This thing just gets rid of all of them and removes them from the game, so your opponent loses that board presence and that attack is over and done with. So it's a pretty cool tech in blue if you're facing down lots of those types of cards. And then finally, guys, we have Mutato. This is probably one of the more like known sideboard techs and even mainboard techs nowadays if you're playing yellow. But Mutato has seen a resurgence in this format thanks to its usefulness against green SS2 Gohan, shutting down their boss monster. And of course, Mutato is not without answers, but it's just such a good versatile card. It's not only good against green Gohan. It's got a lot of usage against a lot of other colors, just tapping those boss monsters, preventing them from swinging on you, which is definitely super solid. So that's what I got for you guys today with the top side deck cards of this month. If you guys have any other recommendations for cards that people should be sideboarding, drop them down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.